What's going on, guys? Now that Game Week 29 blank is behind us, and let's be honest, we're happy it's behind us, we can look forward to Game Week 30 and beyond. In today's video, we're going to be looking at upcoming fixtures, how the FA Cup affects our blanks and doubles, and what players to focus on. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to give you my wildcard draft that is going to help you build a foundation to end the season strong. If you could like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. But without any ado, let's get into it. First and foremost, we have to thank Ben Crellin for putting this calendar together. He's done such an amazing job. And as you can see, Game Week 32 and Game Week 33 are confirmed double game weeks. But Game Week 32 is the only confirmed teams that we know of. That's Crystal Palace and Newcastle. So Crystal Palace play Manchester City and Newcastle. And Newcastle play Manchester United and Crystal Palace. Game Week 33, on the other hand, is a little bit more difficult as we need to know the results of the FA Cup quarterfinals to make our final decisions here. Likewise, for Game Week 34 blank, this is a confirmed blank game week, but we can only know who is blanking once we know what the quarterfinals results are, and that will be on the final game will be played on the 30th, which is 2 days before Game Week 30 deadline. Something that we will know is who is going to blank. So Game Week 34 will be confirmed. We will know who is blanking. But what we won't know for sure is where the doubles will take place. We believe a bunch of them will take place in Game Week 33, but it seems that they are potential to move to Game Week 35 and potentially Game Week 36. So let's start with the confirmed Game Week 32 double, Crystal Palace and Newcastle United. Starting with Crystal Palace, we can see Ismaila Sarr, Mateta, Eze, Lacroix, Munoz, Henderson, the regular names. You look at their fixtures. Southampton in Game Week 30 is an unbelievable fixture, which I know we all want to attack. Brighton in 31, and then our double in 32. Potential double in 33 as well, which is such a bonus to have in Crystal Palace, but we will go over the doubles in just a moment. Starting with Ismaila Sarr, actually has the best underlying stats going forward with an XG of 0.89 in its last 5, as opposed to Mateta of 0.46. Now, that being said, Mateta did miss the last game, so he has one less game worth of stats, but Ismaila Sarr has been doing so well going forward. Mateta's next, obviously, and against Southampton, if Mateta does play, he is going to be so dangerous. Eze is next on the list with 0.33 XG, which is good, and a 0.13 XA. I only worry about Eze as he is potentially a little bit of a trap. I personally would go Sarr over Eze. And then we look at our defenders. Now, our defenders, Lacroix and Munoz. Now, a lot of us already have Munoz, and Lacroix's come up as a bit of a decent option. I mean, he has got an XG of 0.19. Crystal Palace have actually quite a good clean sheets XG, expected clean sheets of 0.55 in the last 5. So the likes of Henderson, especially now, if we move on to Newcastle, you can see the likes of Isak, Murphy, Gordon, Shaw, Livramento, Pope, all very, very good options. And look at those fixtures with Brentford, Leicester, and that 32 double. The only thing we need to take in consideration is they do not double in Game Week 33, but we still want them for the rest of the season, at the very least. Isak. I don't think Isak's going to leave my team between now and the end of the season unless he gets injured. Starting with Isak, obviously has the best XG, 0.48 in the last 5, which oddly is not the best, but is still good. And we know Isak, especially against Leicester in Game Week 31, and look at Game Week 32 with Manchester United, I think he is going to do so well in these next few game weeks. Jacob Murphy as well, actually an XG of 0.36 and an XA of 0.04. Very, very, very good stats. Gordon is next on the list. Now, Gordon, we need to take in consideration that he is suspended until Game Week 31. So if you bring him in now, He won't play in Game Week 30, but he will play in Game Week 31. So if you're wildcarding, maybe bring him in with the idea of moving him out after Game Week 32 to get a full team of doublers in Game Week 33. Just an idea. Shah is actually next on the list with a 0.02 XG and 0.01 XA. Not the best in the world, but better than Livramento's 0 XG and 0.12 XA is very good, to be fair. So maybe Livramento is the way to go. At 1.8% owned, 4.5 million, he is a very, very strong differential, especially now with Hall out for the rest of the season. I think Livramento is probably the Newcastle defender to isolate and bring into the team. Then there's Pope. I personally don't like Pope as an option, as I feel like there are better options for cheaper. Like talk about Henderson, and the only two goalkeepers I really, really like are Henderson and Raya personally. Anything else I feel like is a downgrade. Now let's talk about the FA Cup fixtures and how they are going to affect our blank game week and double game weeks going forward. These fixtures will take place over the 29th and the 30th of March, which is the Saturday and Sunday. We need to remember that deadline for Game Week 30 is on Tuesday, 2 days later. So we don't have a lot of time to build wildcard drafts. So what I'm personally doing is building them with certain teams in mind, depending on how likely they are to double. And I recommend you using this guide to select players quickly. Run through the video, save this video, favorite it. And when we know who doubles and who blanks by the results, come back to this video and use the teams as a guide to build your ideal wildcard so that you can get the most out of Game Week 34 and Game Week 33. So let's go over this. Aston Villa play Preston. Bournemouth play Manchester City. Fulham play Palace. Brighton play Forest. So let's look at Aston Villa playing Preston. If Aston Villa go through, then Manchester City blank because they play each other in Game Week 34. So Aston Villa go through, they blank, which means they both double, which means you probably want to start getting some players in from these two teams. Likewise, if Manchester City win their game, they go through and obviously they double. The reason they are almost guaranteed a double, or in this case to blank in Game Week 34, is because not only do they play each other in Game Week 34, but they are both still in the FA Cup. So only one of them needs to get through to the next stage to have this blank come to fruition. So let's talk about these two teams. Aston Villa, we've got Watkins, Rodgers, Mings, Digne, Martinez. Watkins we need to keep an eye on. I think he's got a little bit of an injury. 8.9 million, 18.2% owned. Underlying stats are pretty good. He has 0.51 XG, 0.04 XA. Not most ideal as he is quite expensive and we are unsure about his fitness. So this is something that obviously between now and deadline, we've got a little bit of time to pay attention to him. Rodgers, on the other hand, 5.5 million, cheap and cheerful, relatively high owned, 16.2% owned, 0.18 XG, 0.08 XA. It's not ideal, but if you want to get into the Aston Villa midfield, he's a good option. And then we've got the defenders, Mings and Digne. Mings has actually got a very good XG at 0.14 and XA 0.03. He seems to be getting forward quite a lot. And Digne with 0.02 and 0.05 respectively. Aston Villa have a 0.29 expected clean sheets over the last 5 game weeks, so it's not the best. So I don't know if I'm necessarily focusing on them for clean sheets, but as a caveat, I don't focus on any team for a clean sheet. I don't think you can predict them. They're far too unpredictable. So let's choose the players in the defensive line that go forward. So in this case, I feel like Mings is the right option going forward. Martinez is not a bad option as a goalkeeper, mainly because he gets save points. At 11% owned, he's relatively high owned, and 5 million, I think there are better options. Manchester City will move on. Haaland is the talk of the town. Everybody's on about Erling Haaland at 14.8 million and 30% owned. Going from 80 to 90% owned to 30% owned is unbelievable. And he is coming into form. And look at those fixtures. Leicester, Manchester United, Crystal Palace, Everton, Villa, Wolves, and ends with Southampton. That Southampton game could be a walkover. But Pep Roulette, we need to remember this. So when you choose a Manchester City team, always take in consideration Pep Roulette. But I feel like Haaland is pretty safe. But the likes of Savinho, Marmoush, Foden, even Gvardiol are not necessarily safe. So with this in mind, I really like Haaland. But if you're not going to do Haaland, I actually do like Marmoush, 12.9% owned, 7.3 million. It's a decent, very, very, very decent option. Gvardiol as a defender going forward, he makes those forward runs. Hasn't recently, but we know he can. And Foden is the troll of all trolls at the moment, 6.2% owned, 9.2 million. There are just much better players than him in the same position. So I wouldn't be looking at Foden, but Haaland definitely, and Marmoush potentially. Ellison is not someone I'd look into either at the moment. Obviously, he has a potential injury. We need to follow up on that, but 5.3 million, and they don't really keep clean sheets. So yeah, let's move on. Now, on to the Bournemouth and Manchester City match. Now, here's the thing. If Manchester City go through, then obviously what we just spoke about, that still happens. But if Bournemouth go through and Aston Villa go through, then the teams that are likely to blank and double increase. So not only will we have Aston Villa and Manchester City blanking and doubling, but we'll have Bournemouth and Manchester United blanking and doubling. So this is where we have an extra set of teams. If we start with Bournemouth, Evan-Nielsen, Tavernier, Semenyo, Kluivert, Kerkez, and Kepa. Now, they have some very, very good fixtures going forward. And Ipswich and West Ham are teams that we want to, mainly Ipswich to be fair, but Evan-Nielsen, Tavernier, Kerkez, Kluivert, very, very, very good options. In respective orders, though, Evan-Nielsen has the highest XG, as he is getting obviously a lot more fixtures now that he is back from injury. The reason Otara is not on here because Otara is not getting the same amount of minutes. He was dangerous when he was playing, but Tavernier is next on the list with a much better XA, XG, considering how many minutes he's getting. Evan-Nielsen, 0.68 XG with the 0.06 XA. Tavernier, 0.3 expected goals, 0.08 XA. And then we're going down to Semenyo and Kluivert, who have roughly, I mean, Semenyo is 0.21 expected goals, where Kluivert has 0.2 expected goals, but Kluivert, it goes ahead of him with 0.29 expected assists. So Kluivert gets into the assists much, much more than Semenyo. Kerkez, on the other hand, we know Kerkez can be dangerous, and at 0.03, which isn't ideal, respectively, goals and assists expected, 0.03 and 0.03. He's not the best choice, I don't think, out of all the players that we are going to discuss. But if you want a Bournemouth defender and you rate the Bournemouth defense, Kerkez is the guy. Kepa, I'm indifferent. I personally don't think he's the best option. I think if you're going to go triple up on Bournemouth, you're going to do it with the outfield players. On to Manchester United, and if I'm perfectly honest, I don't really like any of these options, but out of the options that there are, these are the ones I would select from. Joshua Zirkzee is top of the list at 0.28 expected goals. Garnacho is next at 0.18 expected goals. And Bruno, not Gordon, is next on the list at 0.14 expected goals, which is odd actually because he's coming to a bit of form himself. So maybe the stats are not telling the whole truth here. So out of all these players, Bruno Fernandes is the one I would more likely go for. But if you look at these fixtures, I just wouldn't be bringing him in. If anything, I'd be getting rid of him. Forest, Man City, and Newcastle in the next 3. And as it stands, Bournemouth aren't necessarily even likely to go through as they're playing Manchester City in the FA Cup. It's likely they won't even have a double. So we definitely need to keep an eye on that. We might not be loading up on Bournemouth after all. Next up on the list is Fulham and Crystal Palace. Now, we've spoken about Crystal Palace. They are already doubling in 32. But if Crystal Palace beat Fulham, they get another double, which is potentially going to be in 33 and would actually be likely in 33. But if they don't and Fulham win, then this is the team that these are the players that we'd be looking at. So Fulham go through, they'd play, I think realistically you're looking at Raul, Smith Rowe, Iwobi, Castagna, and Leno. The fixtures aren't great though. So if they do go through, I don't see us necessarily loading up on these two teams. So I think there is a world where people hope Fulham go through, especially people who have already used their free hits in Game Week 29. They hope that Fulham go through because we don't really want Fulham or Southampton players anyway. So if they blank, no one really cares. But if you want to get into these teams, I'd say Raul is top of the list. Iwobi probably next. Southampton, really wouldn't have any of them. But if you're short on cash, Dibbling is probably the best option between Onuachu and Dibbling. If obviously we talk about Brighton going through. Now, if Brighton go through, these are the teams that we are looking to kind of get into. And that is João Pedro, Mitoma, Baleba, Van Hecke, and Verbruggen. They have some decent fixtures to end out the season. So maybe players that you can hold for the rest of the season. João Pedro, we know is potential to get injured, but Mitoma is on form at the moment. So maybe Mitoma is the one to look at. This is something that we'll pay attention to as we go, but as the stats show, João Pedro is top of the list with Mitoma next, and then closely followed by Baleba. Van Hecke, if you want a defender here, Van Hecke is pretty much my only real choice here. Gets his minutes, and if you're going to get clean sheets from Brighton, obviously that's where he benefits. Verbruggen gets save points, and at 2.9% owned, 4.5 million, he's a very reasonable player. West Ham, if I'm perfectly honest, West Ham, I don't love their players other than really Bowen and Wan-Bissaka. Souček is actually popping up on the list. He's getting some good XG. But I've only got 4 players here realistically that I'd look at if Brighton do go through and they do double. Then Bowen, Souček, Wan-Bissaka, and Areola. Cheap and cheerful, gets his minutes. Decent enough fixtures. If you look at their game week 33, if they did double, they'll have Southampton and Brighton, which is a decent double. So I'd be looking at possibly Bowen and Wan-Bissaka. Now on to Forest. So now if Forest go through instead of Brighton, these are the teams that we are going to be looking at. So Forest, I'm looking at Elanga as number 1. Elanga has the best underlying stats out of all of the Forest players, including Wood, who has had a dip in form. At 5.3 million, 6.6% owned, and Wood at 7.3 million and 48% owned. The only thing I would say is if you make this move away from Wood and he does score or get any kind of return, it does affect your rank. But if Elanga, which a lot of people have benefited from, does anything, it increases your rank by tenfold. Gibbs White's next on the list, which, to be fair, between Elanga and Gibbs White, I'm always going Elanga. And if you want to triple up, I would go Elanga, Wood, and Neco Williams. Personally, as Neco, 3.1% owned, 4.4 million, has great underlying stats. And even potentially, if you want to get involved with the best goalkeeper in the game, as far as the stats are concerned, Sells, 5.1 million, 18.7% owned. Maybe that's the triple up, Elanga, Neco, and Sells, or potentially Elanga, Wood, and Sells. Decent fixtures to end the season. I really like it. On to Brentford. If, like I say, Forest go through, Brentford will blank and double. Johan Wieser, Kevin Schade, Mbomo, Norgard, Collins, and Flecken. Realistically, we don't want to look at these as options right now anyway, because look at those fixtures. Newcastle, Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Forest, and then ends with Manchester United and Ipswich. They aren't the best fixtures, but if you want to go in there, probably looking at Wieser, Mbomo, and Flecken are really the players that I'm looking at there. Now, if Crystal Palace go through, we've already spoken about this, but if Crystal Palace go through, then not only do we have Crystal Palace doubling, but we get Arsenal doubling too. And this would be interesting, seeing as Saka is potentially back soon. The only thing I take in consideration is Arsenal, I feel like as a team, have backed away from thinking that they're going to win the league. They think Liverpool are too far away. So will Arteta rest Saka more so that he can use him in the Champions League, because they've got some big Champions League games coming up? Let's look at Arsenal though. Fulham, Everton, Brentford, Ipswich, Palace, Bournemouth, Liverpool to end, which isn't ideal, but some very, very good fixtures leading up to that point. Merino, who's just scored for his international team, Spain, has actually filled a little bit of a hole with all of these injuries they've got. He's got the best underlying stats going forward. Next is Trossard. Odegaard's far too expensive and doesn't really offer much in the way of FPL points. It's defensively that Arsenal are the strongest. So Saliba, Gabriel, and Raya. And you can see that by how much they're owned. Saliba has actually the best underlying stats in the last 5. 6.2 million. He might be a better option to save 0.2 million. And he is less owned. So potentially more space to move. But Gabriel always offers that aerial threat in goal. But as far as defensively, they're probably the best defense in the league at the moment in form and are doing their job. Raya is probably the best goalkeeper for me going forward all the way up until game week 36. Next, obviously, we've already discussed Crystal Palace, Sarr, Mateta, Eze, Lacroix, Munoz, Henderson. I like pretty much all these players, and I think we can make a real team out of these. They might actually be, if Crystal Palace do go through, Sarr, Mateta, Lacroix, Munoz. These are really, really good assets going forward. Now let's move on to the wild card. So now this is my wild card. This is kind of what I'm looking at doing, and I will talk you through it. So in goal, we've gone with Henderson, 4.6 million, playing Southampton. I mean, we all are looking at tripling up on Crystal Palace in this game week 30. It's just Mateta, Sarr, Henderson. We're just looking at points. I am doubling up here with Gabriel and Timber. And in an ideal world, Areola to Raya, but that's just not going to work out in this specific wildcard draft. Kirkes as well. I love Kirkes in this team. We're not getting rid of Salah. We're keeping Salah in the team. He's our captain this week, potentially. I'm still debating whether we, if we know more about Mateta, possibly Mateta. I really like Tavernier and Kluivert in the midfield for now. This is obviously taking consideration if these teams go through into the cup. If they don't, I will go back, select new players that do go through and update the wildcard. But because we only have 2 days to decide, it's potentially a case of waiting till game week 31 when we know for sure. But I personally want to wildcard in game week 30. I will take the chance because I want to triple up on Crystal Palace. Now, then we've got Isak and Haaland. Now, this draft has a Haaland and Salah, so it's very, very expensive. 103.6, 103.6 million. This is a draft I can afford, but not necessarily a draft everyone can afford. So that's where it's a little bit harder. If we go and we change it up a little bit, the price goes down. It's not 103.6 anymore, so ignore that. But this draft changes Raya, changes Areola, brings in Raya, changes Marmoush, and changes Haaland and brings in Marmoush. Neco Williams, Shah, Isak. Now, if you want to bring in potentially Gordon early on, which you could potentially swap him out, but I don't really like Gordon taking up positions. Possibly Alanga. He could go in for Alanga and just sit on the bench for 2 game weeks, which is fine. But that would obviously take your overall squad value up. So I like the way this team is going. And game week 30, 31, I will be changing I will be changing Clivert out and bring Gordon in. And I'll be able to afford that as my team is currently standing. But like I said, if you do this draft here, you could potentially afford it too. So sorry if it's a little bit here, there, and everywhere. I've done my best to give you guys as much information as I have. If you can, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.